denizens of the night, welcome to a special episode, coming to you from a place spoken of only in whispers. I bring you Chapter 1 of an occult mystery, extreme horror mixed with gumshoe noir. Follow me into the city.
Part 1. Chapter 1. Max reclined on a Ming-style bed in the back of Koo's laundry house. Even though most of the building was secretly cordoned off for smoking, leaving little space for an actual laundry business, the room felt cramped and gloomy. Tar-stained walls spoke of loss and promised nothing but temporary escape. Mix in the few beds and dilapidated nightstands, and Koo's was a far cry from the lavish days of the late 18th century. Back then, opium smokers were treated with dignity, and the rooms offered a glimpse into exotic adventures of the East. Not that Max minded a little filth. Once the mind drifted away on opium clouds, what difference did it make where the body was? Beside Max, a young host prepared a pipe and oil lamp. With his smooth, doughy face, Max pegged him for 15. His nimble fingers moved with precision, and Max lost himself to the swift movements, seeing through the hands and imagining the teen's life. What choices led him to Koo's, and what would happen if he stayed at a job like this? It's not easy working certain jobs. Opium host is on that list. It sucks you in until it ceases to be a job and becomes a lifestyle. The transition happens in such small degrees, it's almost undetectable. When you finally realize your mistake, it's too late. Then, much like quicksand, it's best not to fight the inevitable. Struggling only speeds up your demise, increases the pain. Hopefully, the boy would quit the job before it pushed away everything good in his life, before the smoke damaged his body as it had the walls, before the endless stream of lost souls pouring into Koo's dulled the teenager's ambition, sentencing him to a wasted existence. But as the boy got closer to completion, anticipation of the impending euphoria washed away any further thoughts on the boy's future. "Detective Elliot?" "McLeod?" Max looked up, squinting. When the man removed his gloves and black bowler, he became more recognizable. Max chuckled. "Can't believe they let you in here. If you'd shown up 5 minutes from now, I'd assume you were a hallucination." "Yeah, lucky me." John McLeod scanned the meager room. Leo Koo, the building owner, stood a few feet behind McLeod. His lips were pressed firmly together, head bobbing, a nervous tic Max had noticed on his first visit. "Buy yourself a pipe, John. Loitering makes him nervous." "I know." McLeod's smile was dry. "Took a while to convince him to even let me back here. I need to speak with you, so how about we leave?" Without missing a beat, the host finished preparing the opium. Max brought the wooden pipe to his lips, maintaining eye contact with the young criminal investigator of the San Francisco Police Department, a man he'd only met a few times before. The oil lamp vaporized the opium, and Max inhaled, filling his lungs. He lowered the pipe, breath held. McLeod stared back. Max released the poisoned air, and McLeod averted his eyes. A slight sway took hold of McLeod's legs. Max enjoyed the man's discomfort. He lowered his voice so Koo couldn't hear. "It must be terrible to witness criminal activity and not be able to do anything about it." "Can we leave now?" "You can leave. I've already paid for this. I'm not leaving till I'm done." McLeod sighed, and his uneasy gaze settled on an object under the bed. "It's a Himitsu Bako, a Japanese puzzle box," Max said. "Secret box, to be more precise. I buy a new one every few weeks." Sitting up with all the speed of a turtle, Max slid the box out with the tip of his shoe, then paused before grabbing it. He imagined tiny hands wrapped around the sides of the box. The fingers slid over the edges, pulling with as much force as such slender digits could muster. Max remembered telling Leanne that force alone would never solve a puzzle box, or any other enigma. Max kicked the box back under the bed and reclined. He took a second puff, hoping the opium would block further memories of his daughter. Might as well speak on why you're here. This could take a while. I'm here because Lieutenant Harris said you were the best homicide detective in San Francisco. Max's laugh emerged as a quiet sigh through his nose. This dope might make my body slow, but the mind's still sharp. Harris wouldn't say that. Listen, Max. McLeod lowered his voice. I didn't come here to play games with you. I came because Harris thinks you'll be able to help on a case. Apparently, you're a great detective. I wasn't a great detective. I was great at solving puzzles, but I don't belong on the force. Even with my talent, Lieutenant Harris knows I don't have what it takes to serve the people of San Francisco. After a third puff, the silent host took the pipe and oil lamp and retreated into the shadows. So if Harris sent you down here, what did he really say? There's been an incident similar to, McLeod paused. Something similar to the tragedy 6 months ago. Max opened his mouth, but hesitated. The circumstances seem linked, McLeod continued. You must have been great at something once, because Harris feels you're the right person to take a shot at this one. Put it to rest. His orders were to find whatever rock you were hiding under and kick it over. That sounds more like Harris. It's at a housing complex just past Broadway. Tenants complained to the superintendent about noise. He called us. McLeod shifted again. We walked into quite a crime scene. Children were, I'd rather not go into it here. Despite the possible link between his family's tragedy and this new one, Max knew a smile was emerging on his face. After months of non-communication, Harris realized he needed Max to handle these types of cases. Max's composure in the face of especially brutal murders was often mistaken as the sign of a great detective. But being a so-called great, dedicated detective wasn't what allowed him to succeed in closing the books on heinous crimes where others had failed year after year. It was something else, and Harris knew what it was. Well then, you have my interest, McLeod. But before I'll let you take me from this fine establishment, you need to tell me what Harris really said. Fine. McLeod's face hardened. He said you were the best, but that you were also the sickest. That none of this bloodshed would make you bat an eye. You would follow the trail anywhere, blend in with scum, and absorb everything in this case if you had to, because you could. No one else on the force would be able to go to the same lengths, and since you have nothing left, you'd be that much more willing to step forward. Thank you. Max looked at the teenager, now working with a new patron. Opium host wasn't the only profession with heavy hooks waiting to sink into your will. Homicide detective, assigned to the grisliest murders in San Francisco, was somewhere near the top of that list. Max held out his hand. Well, get me the hell out of here, Officer McLeod. We got sights to see. Throngs of onlookers flooded the street around the tenement complex. The scene was painfully familiar to that October night 6 months ago, and memories fought through the opium haze, taking center stage in Max's mind. Despite the cold winds on the night of the tragedy, Max sweated heavily as he walked home. It mixed with Yanmei's lingering perfume, creating a sickly, sweet aroma about his body. Max's satisfaction and guilt mixed about as well as the sweat and perfume. First and last time. That's it. I'm done. Of all the drama he had expected to incur when he returned home, Max never anticipated what waited for him at his apartment. Harris had been there, and a slew of officers questioned the gathering crowd. Harris's face and the fact that no one could look him in the eye said it all. Max pushed past Harris despite his supervisor's pleas to wait. Liquid crimson splashes covered the east wall of his living room, drying in macabre patterns. Only severed arteries left bloodstains like that, and arteries took you quick, every beat of your heart pushing you closer to death. Max saw the remains of his wife next. Eve Elliot couldn't be described as a corpse. She was a pile on the floor. A deranged huntsman or surgeon had taken great care in skinning her like an animal, preserving the flesh with expert incisions and leaving her sloughed-off skin behind, like some ghoulish snake. "My daughter?" "We're not sure yet," someone replied. There was a lot of blood on the wall, but Max had hoped it wasn't enough for 2 people. Tonight, John McLeod led him to a different apartment through similar crowds. 2 officers, doing their best to hold back the nosy people, allowed the duo to pass through the front door. Lieutenant Harris and 3 officers stood inside the lobby. Harris's puffy face was stoic, as usual. Like his face, his sack suit was too baggy and wrinkled, adding to the impression that he had not slept well in days. "Max, thanks for coming." Max nodded, taking off his gloves. His fedora and trench coat stayed on. His eyes and jawline no longer felt as slack as they had at the den. The adrenaline of the situation sobered him up and left him with a different kind of high. It had been so long, he'd forgotten how much he missed the thrill of a new case. "Consider this reinstatement from your leave." Harris waved him forward, and they ascended the staircase. "It's bad, Max. 2 of our men already lost their dinner." "Can't wait." "Neighbors reported screams and loud banging to the landlord. When he finally got around to checking, there was no answer from the tenant. Landlord entered and, contacted us immediately. That happened about noon. The homicide team has been poking around all day, taking shifts while McLeod tracked you down." Harris stopped at a paint-peeled door, 213 etched on the brass plaque screwed into the wood. "And all this has something to do with Eve and Leanne?" "Perhaps. All I know is that your place, that was something I've never seen before. I'm sorry Eve went through that. And damn it, I wish we could have found a lead for... I know." Max held up a hand, then pointed to the door. "But what about this?" "What's behind this door is the only thing that comes close to your place 6 months ago, and I need to believe they're related. How could this city produce separate lunatics who murder this way?" Harris shook his fat red face. "I don't know what the hell happened in there or why, but I need you to find out." Max put his hand on the brass knob, noting there were no signs of a forced entry. Chills ran down his back, reminding him the last murder scene he walked into had been his fault. The cloying odor of blood filled the room. It was metallic and fresh, but Max knew the smell would change soon. His sensitive nose could already detect the putrid twinge emerging in the room. In less than an hour, the entire apartment would reek of rotten meat if the bodies were not removed. He scanned the barren room. There were no pictures or paintings, not a single plant, nor bookcase or knick-knack in the 10-by-10-foot living space. Something about the sparseness told Max it was more than just poverty keeping the room void of personality. Maybe a flophouse. The single piece of furniture was a couch. In it sat a man, a dead man. His head hung backward over the top of the couch. At first glance, age was indeterminable. What was apparent, though, was the gaping hole in his chest. The wound tunneled through the dress shirt, past the flesh and rib cage, to where his heart should have been. Max moved closer, careful to not step on the patches of carpet still wet from the copious amount of spilled blood from the excavated chest cavity. Circling to the back of the couch, Max observed the ashen face, dried blood against a shattered nose. The zygomatic bones forming the eye sockets on both sides of the victim's head looked to be fractured and driven inward, leaving the skin swollen and bruised a dark shade of purple. The eyeballs themselves had bulged slightly from the orbital walls. A watery fluid mixed with blood leaked from the corners of each eye. He assumed a bone shard had ruptured the vitreous chamber of the eyeball. "We're assuming the man knew his attacker." Max looked at Lieutenant Harris, who remained in the doorway. "And this is a botched deal?" "Good of a guess as any," Harris said. "No forced entry, no signs of a struggle, just a sudden attack." Harris breathed through his mouth. The air was turning worse as they spoke. "Maybe while they sat to negotiate, the attacker stunned him with a blow to the head, then went to work on the chest." "Well, that's some crackerjack work, Lieutenant. Gruesome, and the stealing of a heart leads to some questions. But it's nothing your boys can't figure out. I had a real nice Tuesday going before McLeod stole me away. It is Tuesday, right?" "Christ, Elliot. I thought you came here to help." "I thought this had something to do with my family. Turns out you just want your black sheep back because this is not." "They're in the bedroom." Harris gestured down the hallway. The narrow, yellowed walls added a claustrophobic effect as Max led the way. Past the bathroom, the smell got worse. Max stepped into an 8x8 room, and similar to the rest of the apartment, it lacked any character or decoration. This was definitely a squatter's pad, a hideout, not a home. The only furniture in this room was 3 army cots. The victims were on the cots. 3 young bodies, mutilated sheaths of skin draped over the canvas pop-up beds. Max fought the tremble in his jaw. The long hair and height suggested each was a female in their early teens. One of the 3 girls, the one most intact, had an iron shackle affixed to her left ankle. Bloated flesh, blood, and tendons soiled the clamp and chains that led to the frame of the cot. The 2 other victims were something Max had only seen once before, piles of flesh, the husk of the body. Eve. Their hair and skin flayed with expertise so that it remained in one connected piece. The removed organs were clumped together under the cots. Similar chains were fitted to the legs of their cots as well, but nothing solid remained within their shackles. The bones were missing entirely. A knot of pain twisted in his stomach, and Max wished he was back in Ku's opium den. He didn't need closure. He needed a fresh pipe, a pull of whiskey, or a new Himitsubako puzzle. "Let's just give this a try," Max bargained with his unstable mind. "Please, if it doesn't work, Chinatown isn't going anywhere." The promise of future ecstasy was enough to calm the internal cravings. From there, Max turned off the feelings associated with the images and clues of the real-world puzzle box and stared into the empty sockets of the girl suit, long blonde hair still attached to the skull-less face. Her eyes now resided in a pile with the spleen and liver and intestines. Ignoring the immeasurable pain the child must have endured, Max played out scenarios in his mind. He saw the girls as possible kidnap victims of the dead man in the other room. Or perhaps they were daughters of the man and chained up by the killer. Maybe Daddy was the killer. After several minutes, Max's trance was broken by Harris, who entered with nose and mouth buried in the crook of his arm. "The man on the couch has been confirmed as Jeffrey Poppins. The girls are still unknown. This is the only thing we found." A small leather pouch hung from his fingers, and the first piece of the puzzle slid into place.